Do a quick one.
I don't know. Which one you guys want to go? I'm not sure I can help with one. See which one's best for the recordings and stuff.
Right, sit down.
There we go. That's
Okay.
what I wanted off.
Okay.
That's a little better.
All right, sit down.
Pupils back.
Everybody, eyes on deck.
People, not
Okay.
keep turning those on.
Next.
Well, I don't think we ever have.
Yeah.
Why start
Okay.
now?
Check the computer real quickly.
It's not like we're live on TV or anything like that.
Live streaming on YouTube.
Here you are.
We're already live streaming, but
57.
come on.
Okay.
Hey guys, pick your questions, audience participation.
Okay, everybody ready? And one more. Okay.
Wisconsin cheese.
Very
What?
They're using the Human Rights Campaign, the celebrities. I got one from Alyssa Milano a little bit ago too. Just because I'm not somebody's
Excuse me?
Network
We're
here
rolling.
is
Can you believe this?
Titan Wi-Fi, yes?
Yes.
No, it'll stop. No one else can get annoyed with that.
Yeah.
So one of the candidates brought eggs, and if you're gonna throw them, just aim for the purple table, okay?
But not the purple person.
You know, well, I don't know, the purple person. I don't know, who'd that be? Well, you ready? Ready? All righty. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this forum designated to give the opportunity for the candidates for governor to articulate their vision for the state government in the Great Badger State. I'm Jim Perry. I'm the retired campus executive officer and dean of the University of Wisconsin-Fox Valley, now a campus of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. This afternoon's forum was organized and sponsored by UWO's American Democracy Project and the Campus Election Engagement Project. All 6 of the candidates for governor were invited to attend, but as you can see, only 4 of them and their lieutenant governor candidates have chosen to be with you today. The questions for today's forum were conceptualized by Zach Hergus, with help from his faculty advisors David Seamers and James Krieger. I took the liberty of putting them into my own words. So here are the ground rules for today's forum. We'll start with 2-minute introductions by each candidate of who they are, that is, gubernatorial candidates. I don't think we have time for all the lieutenant governors at this time. Who they are and why they're running. Each candidate then will have 2 minutes to answer questions that I will pose to them, and they are to not be interrupted. The forum is being recorded for rebroadcast, so after 58 minutes, we'll take a short break and then we will resume, finishing the questions and then allowing the audience an opportunity to ask their specific questions. At the end of the prepared questions, each candidate will be given an opportunity, if they wish, to ask a question of another candidate, and each candidate will have an opportunity for a closing statement of 2 minutes. So, in random order, let's start by asking Megan Turnbull to introduce herself, and then each candidate can follow in their turn. Maggie?
Thanks so much, Jim. I'm Maggie Turnbull. I'm running as an independent for governor of the state of Wisconsin. I'm running as an independent because I don't think that the two-party system is meeting our needs anymore as a population. We have to get away from a system that is obsessed with dividing us from each other and results in relationships that are strained and ruined because of the kind of rhetoric that comes from our leaders. And I know from my own experience serving on the City Council of Managua, Wisconsin, that when people are sincere about wanting to solve real problems in order to keep cities running and states running, they come together regardless of politics and they just get the job done. I've seen it over and over again. And I think that that's who we really are as a people, and I want to see that reflected in our state legislature as well. I actually want to turn the last few seconds over to my running mate, Will Loesch, to introduce himself as well.
My name's Will Loesch. I'm a dad and a teacher from the northern part of the state of Wyoming. This is my second time running for office. I've ever received some really good years back. And I teach government. And so I see the whole spectrum, the political spectrum. I think there's ideas all over the spectrum, but I'm fully with Maggie and believing that the two-party system just isn't serving us. And the two parties have gotten dogmatic, and we're not good at taking the ideas that are called for a given moment, whether that idea originates from the left or the right. That's why I'm running as an independent.
Michael?
I'm Michael White. I'm the Green Party candidate for governor. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I'm a doctor. I work at a major medical system in Wisconsin. I'm running for governor because the #1 issue for me is climate change. Our children's future is in jeopardy. Your future, your lifetime, will see major change in environmental degradation. Secondly, healthcare is broken. I'm tired of my patients being in tears over the cost of their medicines. Third, we have a political system where people have been voting their fears for the last 50 years. Up, down, yes, no, it's not working well, it is not serving your needs. No other voices other than the two major voices and the major companies' voices are heard. So there is no opportunity for intelligent discussion. We have an election which has become totally polarized. Each side hates the other, neither side listens to the other. The Green Party and my colleagues are an alternative of other voices where we will work together, we will come together, we will provide solutions. And I'm going to turn over to my Lieutenant Governor.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Anderson. I decided to run on the Green Party ticket primarily because we don't accept corporate financing. It's so difficult as a politician to run the states or the country as for the people when you're getting your major financing from corporations. So I decided Green Party in order to run for the people and to represent your issues instead of major corporations' issues. I am graduated from UWM with majors in human resource management and supply chain and operations management, and I'm fully prepared to help manage the state. Thank you.
Arnie?
Excellent, we're going on a border, keeping me on my toes. I'm Arnie Enns. I'm running for governor underneath a party of my own invention called the Wisconsin Party. First thing I want to do is thank Zach, Ian, and Gabby for hosting this American Democracy Project. Great idea, thanks for doing this. And you as well, Jim, for hosting this. It's awesome. And to UW Oshkosh, home of the Titans, which is where I went to school. So, as a matter of fact, I like to call it Harvard on the Fox, not Oshkosh, because it's that good of a school, for real. But back to the order of business is I'm running, and it's this thing I'm trying to do societal transformation through political organization and societal organization. So I'm running, but it's not about me. If I run and I don't win, it's just me running for governor. It's got to be about more than that. That's why I want to do this Wisconsin Party thing. Get ballot access with 1% of the vote. Regardless of getting ballot access or not, we're going to continue to organize. And it's about providing a voice to the disenfranchised, the disillusioned, for the dislocated, for the people that don't have a voice in our current government, because we don't. Right now, our government's really about representing corporate interests to a large degree. And a lot of people will go, wham, wham, corporate interests, and this is all some kind of conspiracy theory thing, but it's not. There's actually studies out there, if you go and you do a little bit of research, you'll see that common people's voices aren't heard. The voices are heard of people that contribute to the election campaign process, as well as lobbyists. And there's tons of examples, right? Foxconn's one. Another smaller one is the Bucks Arena, right? The Milwaukee Bucks and their lobbyists spent $50,000, excuse me, a little bit less than $200,000 to get a huge $250 million subsidy to build an arena, right? That's essentially buying government. You and I don't have that kind of money. Why would we get our voices if we can take back our government? So the Wisconsin Party has three simple things. And remember, it's about the Wisconsin Party, not about me. And the first thing is to take back your government. The second thing is to leave things better than you found it, which highly echoes Dr. White's Green Party platform as well around environmentalism and short runway that we have left. And the third thing is to be kind.
Thank you, Ike. Phil.
Hi there, my name is Phil Anderson. I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor in Wisconsin. I am a native of Beloit, Wisconsin. I spent my whole life here except for serving 3 years in the U.S. military as a combat medic in the Patriot Missile Battalion back a long time ago, and where I served was West Germany, which doesn't exist anymore. I'm a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a degree in geography. I also have a master's degree in applied theology. I have 2 kids, one of them is here today, not to embarrass him, but my son Samuel was very involved in my political campaign as well. I'm very happy to have him here. I haven't always been involved and interested in politics for my entire life, but about 10 years ago I recognized, much as my colleagues have, that there's a problem with our government. And the fundamental problem isn't about Democrats versus Republicans, or liberals versus conservatives, or whatever. It's about a fundamental relationship that's broken between people who have rights as people, as individuals, as human beings, and the tyranny that is foisted on individuals and on local communities by government that's being controlled by a two-party system that, as Tiffany mentioned, is largely controlled by corporate interests. That's why I got involved in government. All of our issues on our platform are involved with local control and returning power and authority back to the citizens without the control of big corporate interests. And I'd like to introduce my running mate, Patrick Baird. We run as a team. Our website is teamgov.org. And
real quickly, I've lived all around the state of Wisconsin. I currently work as a patient advocate. I assist people with their healthcare problems, getting their claims paid and their appeals paid, so I'm very familiar with that particular part of the debate that we're having here. The reason I got involved is very simple. There's plenty of candidates out there who are talking about all the things that government can do for you, all the things that government, they're promising that government can deliver. I thought we needed some voices out there that are going to talk about why maybe government shouldn't be involved in your life, and why there's things that government shouldn't be doing, and why there are things that can be done outside of government more effectively and more efficiently, and also to talk about, in some cases, like criminal justice reform, why the government gets involved in a way that's not positive.
Thank you very much. The first question for all of you regards your role as third-party candidates. What argument can you make to Wisconsinites to fight against the narrative that third parties can't win? And how would you respond to the suggestion that you might be repeating the role of Bernie Sanders, Ross Perot, and Ralph Nader, and what the role they played in national elections? And we'll start with Mike.
Okay, so I get that question a lot, and it's a fair question, but let me observe that third-party candidates have won. We'll start with Abraham Lincoln. The Republican Party, when he won, was a new third party. Teddy Roosevelt also won as a third party, so it's not the case that third parties cannot win. It is the case that the third parties in today's election are being curtailed by the major parties because it's not in their self-interest. We do not and did not take votes away from Hillary during the last election. In point of fact, Jill Stein, 60% of her voters were new voters. Also, I would observe that if you wanted to credit Jill Stein's voters to Hillary, then you have to credit Johnson's votes to Trump, which he still would have won the election. So the argument that we take votes away, I think, is a fallacious argument to begin with. But consider what you're faced with. You're faced with voting your fears. You only have 2 choices. Neither one of them are good. Political expertise, political scientists, political studies have shown again and again that it's the other voices in the middle the others that are not polarized and not committed to only one viewpoint that accomplish change. Nobody at the major political party is really talking climate change. My primary goal, and one of the goals of the Green Party, is to change the conversation because your future is in jeopardy. So we bring a new voice to the table, we can influence the major parties, and we may wind up growing a third party. Finally, if we have ranked choice voting, every vote counts. In the current system, you only get A or B and nothing else. With ranked choice voting, which Maggie explains even better than I do, every vote counts. And the third parties would be a major player that would be in a constructive way. And with that, I will pass.
Bill?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Dr. White said, pointing out the fact that third-party candidates have won, and that the reason that we're not heard in the public sphere right now is because of the massive amount of money that's spent by Democrats and Republicans in order to keep us out. We know that the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association has set artificially high criteria for allowing us in the debates that they sponsor. Thankfully, we have forums like this to participate in where we can get our voices heard, but clearly Scott Walker and Tony Evers are not here, so this isn't even really a forum that really is between all the candidates involved. I'd like to point out something that we probably all share in common as well. When you set out to run as a third-party candidate or an independent, you know right off the bat that your chances of winning are slim because of the political realities, the money involved, and the way that people generally conceive of politics as being left and right, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. But there's still secondary goals that can be met, but they are required that you vote for third-party candidates if you support them. And that is, there's a protest aspect in it. When the major parties see that people are not just falling in line, they got a particular issue, an individual has a particular issue, whether it's marijuana legalization, climate change, guns, whatever it is, Democrats and Republicans take those voters for granted. And that's one of the reasons that Hillary Clinton's campaign didn't go so well in Wisconsin, is because she took different blocks of voters for granted in Wisconsin. When you cast a vote for a third-party candidate, in particular a libertarian, and you're saying, I am not happy with the two choices I've been given, I reject the idea that Democrats and Republicans can solve problems. I reject the idea that government can solve all of our problems. And when you make that statement, not only when you answer a poll, but when you cast a vote, then we'll have the situation that we have right now, where since the Marquette poll came out and had Evers and Walker tied at 47, with myself polling at about 5, I'm getting a tremendous amount of messaging saying, drop out and support Tony Evers or Scott Walker, because now they're concerned. Now they're finally concerned about who's not voting for them, who's not falling into line. And that's progress, not only for our campaign, but for everybody.
Arnie?
Yeah, this is the great part about working with these other candidates is we share so much in common. And I wish that that commonality could be expressed through a current two-party system as well. And the thing we're all talking about agreeing with when people talk about third-party candidates, taking away from who might win the next election, because it's the most important election of our lifetime, again, is that we all agree, right? We need to do anti-corruption sorts of things with our electoral process. So what I have that's a little bit unique, and that I actually asked Josh Cowell about the last time we had an opportunity to sit with him in the shared forum, was if he would support the American Anti-Corruption Act. It's an act that's put together by constitutional lawyers that represent the whole spectrum of politics in the United States, and it calls for election reforms as well as governmental reforms to eliminate the influence of lobbyists as well as money in the election process. So I think we can all agree we should do those kinds of things, but only by running as a third-party candidate can we even have that conversation. Both parties say they want to get money out of politics, get the corruption out of government, but yet it's a captured system. It's a captured regulatory system, like a lot of issues we have with the way our regulatory system works, but the election process is a captured system. There's a whole industry built around this. Michael Porter, he's a Harvard strategist, kind of on competition thinking person, has an effort he's put out. It's also about calling this up, and they have reforms that they suggest. So it's not just third-party people, it's people in business that are highly respected, and it's both sides want to reform this broken process of how our elections work. Because right now you do have just two choices, but it's a duopoly. And what we should move towards is multi-party representation. Things like fair districting are a great idea.
And when we're in a situation where people are hedging everything and vote for the one thing they really believe in, that's a bad situation for our country. And we need to be courageous as individual voters. We cannot continue to hedge and second guess and try to predict what everybody else is gonna do, and then proclaim, well, you can't win, because that refrain, you can't win, it's like a mantra that works against us. We say it over and over again, even though we don't have evidence for that, right? The election hasn't happened yet. But by saying you can't win over and over again, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if all the people just voted for what they really believed in, we would win.
The next question addresses the state budget, and Arnie, we'll start this with you. Medicaid requires the state to pay more in health care costs year by year, and it has created a 2 decades-long fiscal crunch in the state. Previous and current administrations have raised income taxes, raided the transportation fund, and slashed salaries and benefits of public employees. How would you ensure that the state has enough revenue to remain solvent?
Excellent. Zach, thanks for this question. Well written. Answering in the context of that question, it's difficult because you have to raise taxes essentially. So that presupposes you keep the system as it is. And what I would do, and I've mentioned this on the website in other interviews in the past, is that we have to step back and look at our healthcare system holistically. So to presuppose it all has to be paid for from the state government, the way that's funded in order to fill the gap with Medicare, isn't necessarily true. The fundamental issue we have with healthcare is that it keeps going up in cost and our quality of service doesn't get better. The OECD, this consortium of countries that are market-based democracies in the world, put out numbers on healthcare. And right now the US currently is spending 18% of our total GDP on healthcare. And the average for the OECD nations is less than half of that. And yet we have the worst outcomes on average of any country. We're in the bottom quartile of almost every measure for healthcare outcomes. So that makes you stop and think the very system we have using Medicare and Medicaid and say we just have to fund gaps in that in order to provide insurance is the wrong approach. What we really have to do is do what other countries have done, look at a single payer approach with universal coverage such that we can negotiate as a large collective group of people against the system itself, which is set up for its own self-interest and its own profit motives. 20%, almost $1 in $5 goes towards healthcare. And that really has a drag on our economy. It prevents us as individuals to have a free-flowing labor market as well, especially amongst younger people. You have poor job quality opportunities, and oftentimes you're scrambling how to figure out healthcare. Once you get a job in healthcare, you feel locked into it. So it has a drag on us in so many different ways that we really have to step back, not just look at it from the perspective of what gaps we have to fill. Ideally, we pay a little bit more towards healthcare as a collective society, and we pay less as individuals. And that way you get the outcome that the rest of the OECD nations have right now. Thanks.
Bill?
Well, I agree with Arnie in assessing the problem. Healthcare has gone up, health insurance has gone up in every way, shape, or form, including private health insurance and government-run insurance. The problem, though, the basic problem is that the insurance industry is writing all of the legislation that goes to the federal and state governments. Obamacare was written by lobbyists. That's why you heard all the people that were about to vote on it saying that they hadn't read the bill and they don't know what was going to happen. Lobbyists wrote Trump's response to it that he presented after being elected. Lobbyists are involved in every aspect of our government. And the result of that is we have health insurance that's involved in every aspect of health care. The option to that is freeing primary care and basic services from insurance. I belong to a subscription service in Madison. There are other subscription services available where you get your primary care by paying a monthly fee that covers your basic exams, visits, the doctor writes prescriptions, and basic labs. It costs less than $100 a month. There's nobody subsidizing that for me. I pay for that. And I carry health insurance for catastrophic, for unexpected things like insurance is basically meant for. If we look at the analogy of car insurance, think about if you had to have car insurance to cover every single thing you did with your car, how expensive would that be? How bureaucratic would that be? And how much control would the insurance company have over what you drive, how you drive, where you drive? That's the same thing with healthcare right now. So we need to make an effort to get the health insurance industry out of our legislation, holding our legislators to account that they're writing their own bills and they know that what's in them, and creating opportunities for these subscription services to come forth. And then if we need, and we will need, a safety net so that people can still access health care that don't have the means to do so. We're subsidizing something that's inexpensive and accessible, and not just funneling money back to the health insurance industry, which is the cause of the problem in the first place.
Maggie?
Yeah, I really appreciate both Arnie and Phil's ideas. I would say on the healthcare front that I am in favor of taking the federal dollars that are available for expanding healthcare to the people who need it most and can't afford it. You know, I'd also say in terms of the state remaining solvent as a whole, in my opinion, the only thing worse than raising taxes for everybody is lowering them and then taking out loans that we're all going to be accountable for. And you know, this year, I mean, that's just kicking the can down the road. That's not actually solving anything for the state. And this year we saw a $100 tax credit for families with children. And my thought was, boy, you know, you're going to take that $100 and invest it right now because you're going to need that to pay back, you know, the bills that are going to come due in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So that is not effective problem solving, in my opinion. But we also want to make sure that we close tax loopholes for the wealthiest entities in the state, whether we're talking about the richest individual people or we're talking about corporations. We want to make sure that this is something the League of Municipalities is on board with, and we've got to close this dark store tax loophole so that the businesses, big box stores that are really extracting a lot of wealth from our communities, that they are also paying their fair share. So lots of pieces to the puzzle.
And Mike?
So I start off with a little different perspective than everybody else because I'm a practicing physician. I treat patients every day. In the first place that I would start, remember the governor can't write laws. The governor can make an issue public. The governor has the ability to hold the legislature accountable, but she or he has to start with what can the government, the administration control. So the first thing that I would look at is drug costs. My pharmacy where I work paid in September 2014, paid $9 and change for a tube of a steroid ointment that I write every day. 3 months later, the cost for that same tube was $175, a 20-fold increase. I'm assuming some people here watch TV and you've seen ads for the drugs for psoriasis, Enbrel, Stelara, Otezla, whatever. The average cost of those per year is 50% greater than the median income. So to the extent that the government has the ability to go after costs, I would work with other state governments and nonprofit organizations to do anything I could to control the cost of healthcare. Then I would do all the other things that they've been talking about. That's the advantage of coming last, is I get to steal their ideas. All of which are good ideas. And what you will notice today is that you will see more agreement than you see disagreement. You will see us actually answering questions about substantive issues. And I agree with what Maggie says. It's not a simple problem, but we pick up one thread at a time and we don't stop until we solve it. I would start with drug costs.
Thank you. Well, given where we are today, we would be remiss if we did not ask about K-12 education and higher education. We'll start with you, Phil. Wisconsin does not rank favorably among the states in the Midwest as it regards educational attainment. UWO, the tuition and fees amount to about $7,500 per year. When books and housing are added, the cost jumps to nearly $20,000 a year. Student debt is routinely in the news. If elected governor, what would you do to both improve K-12 and higher education and make it more affordable?
Well, that's a lot in 2 minutes. But I'll start with K-12 and hopefully finish that in a minute, then do higher ed in the second minute. We have a proposal called Universal Open Enrollment. What that proposal will do is put education back in the hands of parents who are currently paying for education. Oftentimes we see the disconnect when we talk about federal dollars or spending, and the fact that that money comes from individual communities and individual taxpayers to begin with. For example, our K-12 system is funded by property taxes. And everybody pays property taxes. Whether you own a house or not, if you're a renter, you're paying property tax to your landlord. What we seek to do is put parents back in control by freeing up the dollars that are normally assigned to open enrollment, the situation where you can take your children and move them to a different school district and there's a dollar amount that changes hands between districts. Put that back in the hands of parents so they can not only choose a different public school district, choose a private school that doesn't have Common Core standards attached necessarily, which is what the Walker administration does with their voucher program, or any private school they want, or homeschool. put parents back in charge. Because the idea that taxes are farmed from us, taken from us, and then somehow the government knows exactly what's best for our students and limits our choice, I think is ridiculous and unjust. As far as tuition prices or tuition costs go, we see a direct correlation between the amount of student aid offered, especially in terms of loans, and the increase in tuition. Clearly, it's not a question of throwing money at students and allowing them to pay more for college, because every year since the federal loan subsidies increased, the tuition goes up. We need to look at alternate ways of education that people can access college education that don't necessarily require them to be in residence at a particular schedule at a university. Look at ways to lower those costs and stop funneling money from individuals who borrow money and then owe it for years and years after they've graduated. That ends up in the hands of higher education. And we see the ratio of administrators to faculty increasing. We see the amount of new buildings being built increasing. That's where that money's going to. They're making students borrow to pay for more administration and more buildings. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Maggie?
Yep, one of the reasons that I chose Will Loesch as my running mate is because he is an educator, and I consider myself an educator in addition to being a scientist. I worked in classrooms at every grade level from K through 12 and taught in our Wisconsin Technical College system, which I think is an incredible system for people who don't fit with the university but have, need access to great jobs. And then the university system itself, which has been under attack by this administration, I think it's fair to say. And one of the changes I'd like to make is make sure our Board of Regents is actually representing the interests of education in our state and understands the purpose of the UW system. And we want to focus too on the individual colleges and what their strengths are and really play to those strengths, and then maybe do some distance learning to be more efficient as a UW system. But I want to turn it over to Will to talk about K-12 in particular.
Yeah, first of all, I would say that it's important to recognize that every single one of us benefits from public schools, whether we have kids in the system or not, and even if we spend our whole lives going through private schools. The nurses that are going to take care of us in our final years likely were educated in a public school. So we all benefit from it, so we all need to support it. What we do, we need to overhaul the state funding formula so that rural and inner city schools aren't getting shortchanged. They're getting shortchanged big time right now. We need to adjust local revenue caps so that they're equal. Up in my neck of the woods, you can go to one school and they're allowed to raise $11,000 for a student, and 30 miles away, they're capped at $9,200. So those need to be equalized. That can be done in a tax neutral way. We do need to stop the flow of tax dollars to private schools. Public dollars should go to public schools. We need to support and regrow our public charter school system and innovation there. And we need to support science instruction, get kids outside. And then lastly, I think we need to revamp standardized testing and by de-emphasizing it and reworking it.
Michael?
So I'm going to exhibit one of those rare moments of vigorous disagreement. I disagree very much with Phil. I like some of his ideas, but I live in the country and the people near me don't have a way to get to an alternative school. The people in downtown Milwaukee don't have good alternate school choices available to them, nor do they have the resources to deal with private schools. And I think it's got some merit, but I don't think it's practical. I agree with Will 100%. This is a nation of immigrants. We became Americans in large part because of the quality of our public school system. Our public school system brought people together. It is the foundation of giving everybody in an egalitarian society an equal start in life. So I think it is most important, I would not ignore higher education, but I think it's most important to focus on our primary schools first. And I got to tell you, every time I look, it gets more complicated. The devil's in the details, and I actually don't have all the answers. I would hire Will and people like him to help me find the right thing to do, which is not driven by lobbyists. It's not driven by special interest. It would be driven as much as possible by parents. And I would go from there. I don't think the answers are simple. In some cases, we are going to have to throw money at it because I think our educational system has been underfunded. but we need to get the people that know what they're doing involved, get politics identity, racial identity, and all the other things, religion, all the other things that are muddying the waters out of it, and focus on what does it take to provide a quality education for every student in every school in the state. And with that, I pass.
Leonardo.
Again, going last is great, because I can say I agree with just about everything. And what Will had said and what Michael had said, I agree with. Also with Phil, going back at the secondary education process, yes, we do have to look at putting caps on or asking why we spend so much money on buildings and administration for education. But starting with K through 12, I agree we have to rework the formula for distribution of property taxes throughout the state for its allocation. We have to remove local caps. But we also have to step back and ask ourselves a different question. So as governor, what I'd like to do is establish a blue ribbon commission. And it's one of those kind of amorphous terms. But yeah, we need to get the smartest and brightest people that we have to talk about what we should have for an educational system, because ours is failing us. And it's not just K through 12, it's also our post-secondary educational processes. We started with the Wisconsin idea of UW-Madison. We need to remember that and go back to that on how we can best serve all the people of Wisconsin and everything in Wisconsin with their educational process. We've gotten away from that. And we have to ask ourselves, we imported the system 200 years ago that was great for the Industrial Revolution, but we have to build a new system, one that works in today's economy, and also the realities of climate change we have within our system. We need to teach fundamentally different things that I call our 4 C's, and that I charter this Blue Ribbon Commission with, that it's about teaching creative thinking, critical problem-solving skills, collaboration, communication. And you can get that from our educational system, but it's not the focus of it. And to me, those are the kinds of things we have to do and reinforce through our whole life cycle. Even post-secondary education and beyond, we should all be continuously learning, continuously trying to better ourselves and the world around us. That's part of what our social contract is with each other, and education is one of those key pillars of our society that we have to pay a lot more attention to, and not quibble over small items with it like we do now, and be narrowly focused only on things like charter schools or what gets taught. My time's up, thanks.
Okay, Maggie, you're first on this one. We've all seen billboards about Scott holes. All humor aside, how do you propose to pay for our crumbling transportation system and other infrastructure needs?
Yeah, no two ways about it. We have some hard decisions to make. So I think it's interesting to note that Wisconsin has more paved roads than any state in the union. And I think that surprises people because we're not the largest state in the union, but we have a very distributed population with a lot of paved roads connecting them all together. And we also live in a part of planet Earth that experiences a freeze-thaw cycle every year. And that's very hard on our roadways. We've also made decisions in the past 10 years not to develop alternative transportation that would have taken pressure off of our highways. That train system between Milwaukee and Minneapolis through Madison really could have helped us out a lot when it comes to our infrastructure, in addition to providing a lot of jobs. And I think that if we get an opportunity like that again, we better not pass it up. That would have benefited a lot of people. And the rejection there was just purely a rejection of President Obama. So let's continue, let's get back to looking at how alternative transportation can relieve pressure on our highways. We are gonna have to just straight up, we're not made of money, right? So we're gonna have to just straight up prioritize what are the most serious projects that are affecting the most people and cause the greatest safety hazards. And we're gonna have to do those first and work our way down the list. I hope that when we are building roads, we can move toward a model where we're taking 15-year bids. We want a highway, we don't just want a new highway, we want a highway that's gonna last at least 15 years. What's it gonna cost? And that's the bid. Because every time we have to fix something, it interrupts our economy. We get blocked traffic, we get accidents, we get a lot of problems. And so just by investing a little bit more up front on high quality roads, we can save ourselves in the longer run. But we have to be intentional about that. And then something that, this might be a small part of the puzzle as well, is do we actually need as many paved roads as we have? So I will stop talking now. Thank you so much.
Michael?
So I agree with everything that Maggie said, so I can pass that, but I want to talk about the railroad for a minute, because we're going to come to Foxconn eventually. Foxconn is going to give us maybe 13,000 jobs, temporarily, until they automate all those jobs out of existence. And we had to give them a $4.5 billion tax cut to do it. The railroad, light rail project that Governor Walker turned down would have created 36,000 jobs, and they would have been durable jobs. It would have benefited the economy in a durable way. So what would I do about our roads? Well, I like what La Crosse County is doing. I got a flyer in the mail telling me on Tuesday there's going to be an advisory referendum. Do I want to pay for the roads personally by borrowing money, kicking the can down the road, and paying interest for a long time? Do I want to raise my license plate fees for me and all the truckers? Or do I want to take money from those evil tourists that come into town and will tax all the tourist industries because they're destroying our roads? I would argue that each of those has a little bit of merit, but I think we're going to do some of each of them because I don't think it's going to be a simple problem to solve. And I think we're going to have to prioritize. We're going to have to pick the most serious places first. We're going to have to go. I've never heard this 15-year project before, so I'm going to steal that idea because I think that's great. I'm retired military, and we did have projects in the military that I was involved in selecting where it had, this has to last X number of years. When you invest in equipment for an overseas military installation that may come under fire, you have very specific criteria that need to be met, and durability is one of them. So I'm going to steal all of Maggie's ideas and throw in a few of my own, and I'm done.
Arnie?
Yeah, so again, I agree with a lot of things these guys just said, so I'm not going to cover it again. But I would think that we should pay out our current revenue streams for the things that we use today. So with taxes, you either have a gas tax or else you could have something that's more of a progressive tax rather than a regressive tax and make it be associated with the value of a vehicle or a number of wheels on a vehicle for truck drivers and the like. It's a way to have more proportional spend for usage of roads. But the larger question is about infrastructure. And this is where I'm going to bring up a subject completely unrelated that ties back with it, if you will bear with me for a minute. It's around our economy in general. We constantly preach growth in our economy. If you look over a 90-year history, it's between 2% and 5% every year except for a handful of years where you have a recession. We have to change how we operate as a society, or else we're going to run out of resources, and that ecological disaster that's looming is going to come at us even quicker. So part of an infrastructure plan or a road plan or consumption of petro fuels has to be a part of that growth. So I would advocate, and I'd use the governor's office as a platform to talk about, is let's pursue zero GDP growth for 2 years. Well, we talk about how to shrink in a smart way. So we have to shrink our economy, we have to shrink our infrastructure, we have to shrink our consumption and materialism if we're going to have any shot at being sustainable within the carrying capacity of Earth as a system. I know it's a lot of stuff, it's kind of long-winded, but if you go and you have the time, I have a page on my website for it, but look up degrowth or negative GDP growth. There's alternative economic models that we need to discuss. If we're really going to truly say, I believe climate change is happening, or I believe we have sustainability issues, or I believe we're poisoning ourselves and our society. If you believe that, you cannot continue to vote the way you vote or to believe in constant growth. If you want to change that, you have to start advocating for different ways of thinking in large about our society, what we do every day, and what we do as individuals. Because what we're doing today is not going to work. Thanks.
Okay, let's turn to our natural resources, and Michael, you're going to be first.
Oh, I didn't get a chance.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you, Phil. I checked you out, but you didn't. Sorry.
Oh, that's no problem. This is actually a subject that I have a good deal of experience with. Not only did I study urban transportation as part of my geography degree, but I've been in the taxi business in Madison for about 25 years. Something we should talk about when we talk about large-scale alternative transportation projects is that pretty much every train system that's been imposed on a city or a state in the last, well, since Chicago grew up around its train system, and New York did as well, is that they lose money and they're low on ridership. You can't impose a mass transit situation that's involved in trains on an existing developed area because there's not population density enough for that, there's not ridership enough for that, and while there's probably politics involved, I'm sure there was politics involved in the rejection of the train idea, there was also serious cost issues about what was being picked up by the federal government, what would cost the state, and how many people would ride it. And that was part of the situation as well. And I personally oppose the train as somebody who's been involved in that industry. But the problem with the DOT and about building roads is actually about, we don't even really know how much it costs to build roads. It's interesting that Maggie brought up that we have the most paved roads in the country. I did not know that. But I don't think it's just because we have a dispersed population, because other states have that, or because of our climate or whatever. We know for a fact that there's a ton of corruption in Wisconsin DOT going back through the Tommy Thompson administration. Those people that lobby the state government and legislators have an office right across the street from the Capitol, and they're up there all the time. And as a matter of fact, just a couple of weeks ago, it was pointed out by the Journal Sentinel that the Wisconsin DOT regularly double pays contractors for parts of road projects in Milwaukee, and those contractors didn't have the sense or they're not used to having to report that back to the state in the way that it would get returned. Clearly, there's a ton of corruption. So the first thing I'll do as governor is order a forensic accounting firm to do an audit of the Wisconsin DOT, so at least we can get to a point where we get rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse and the corruption and find out exactly what it costs to build a road in Wisconsin, and then go from there.
All right. Now, the state's natural resources in you, Michael. According to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the current administration and majority party have engineered a major shift in how the Wisconsin DNR operates, loosening regulations protecting our natural resources. Employment within the DNR has fallen by 22%, a reduction that started in the Doyle administration. The Division of Science Services has been eliminated. The phrase climate change has been banned from the DNR website. How do you view these changes, and what would you do as governor to address our natural resources challenges?
It is not true that I paid Zach to write that question in a way that would fit everything I wanted to talk about. But I'm the Green Party candidate, and the main reason I got involved in this was concern about the environment. I could go on for, I promise this won't take longer than 20 minutes. But the reality is that I've got a limited amount of time, so I would start by putting science back into the state government, into the DNR. I would make fact-based decisions instead of policy decisions. My platform is put planet, principle, and people ahead of profit. We need no more Pruitts. A Pruitt is a short-term choice made for the benefit of a few, usually a company, with disastrous downstream consequences. When we waive pollution fines for big companies, when we give giveaways of natural resources to big companies, we're not putting the people first. So I would do an assessment of where we are at. I could go on for an hour about climate change, and I would like to, but as the governor, I would start by working with all the governors of the states bordering the Great Lakes to have a real state of assessment of the status of the Great Lakes and our water supply and how we are causing pollution. And then I would work with them and all the other states that have signed on to the Paris Climate Accords. I would work with creating reciprocal agreements with the other states where we share natural resources. And to the extent possible, I would be transparent and I would lead the way, because the governor can lead by example, and our current example is terrible. And with that, I will pause and pass.
Phil?
I agree with a lot of what Dr. White said, and I think there's more that the state can do as well. We all were at an event up in Kashina, Wisconsin, the Menominee Indian tribe, back in, I think it was June or July, talking about, it was called Water is Life. And the issue up there was a mine that was permitted to be, began on the Michigan side of the Menominee River. And the concern up there was not only with the Indian tribe, but the adjoining counties, that there would be water pollution because of this mine that would affect the property and enjoyment of the property of people that live along the river and inland from there. The state basically is willing to do nothing about it, and that's part of the problem. A proper role of government is to enforce the rights of the little guy, the rights of the property owner, the rights of the individual. And as governor, what I would do in that situation, in any situation where somehow or another a big company got a permit to open up, whether it's a mine or a cattle operation or whatever, that was creating pollution and wrecking people's property around it, is to stand up for the individual rights and the property rights of those people around it. That's a directly anti-corruption sort of thing. Right now, we've got a governor in place who has changed the rules about mine permits, and who allows mines to open in whatever part of the state, not allowing local units of government to make their own permit decisions, and getting rid of the rule that they had to demonstrate that they had operated for 10 years cleanly before they located there. That's clearly Governor Walker saying, I don't care what's going on locally, I just want this mine open, and there's probably campaign contributions coming back from that. If we stand up for individuals' rights to enjoy their own property, then the situation of pollution, the situation of natural resources, all those things that we understand are symptoms of corrupt government can go away. And when people want to spend money on politicians and to get things done, we will resist that, and it won't happen because we have a solid, fundamental, philosophical respect for people who enjoy their own property, no matter how close they are to a mine that might be politically useful.
Maggie?
Yeah, you know, I would say that, so in this country, I would say we have a lot of respect for science. It's a lot of what has made our country great. Yeah. And the Republican Party, you know, I have to point out, has been good for science in a lot of ways. You know, as astronomers, you know, the Republican Party can be relied upon to make big investments that really move our nation forward on science and technology fronts. However, in the state of Wisconsin, it's like a left turn away from that. And someone who makes an observation and is capable of seeing the consequences of an action is a scientist. That's all science is. And when people specialize in that, and we welcome them into our government offices so that we can understand how to make policies that are informed by careful observations, that is what helps our state remain solvent and preserve the natural heritage that we are so proud of here and that attracts people to our state. So I agree with basically everything Michael and Phil just said. And I want to say that as governor, I will definitely be returning a culture of respect for science to the state of Wisconsin.
Arnie?
And I also echo all of those things. And the Democrats say that as well, right? It's like put science back in the DNR. Of course, we should do that. These things are about the discovery of truth, not necessarily about the discovery of what somebody's political preferences are in order to make a case for resource extraction or for businesses to set up. Of course, that's a part of our economy in the world we live in today, but it has to be balanced with looking at a larger picture. As I indicated in my last response, our society's at risk because of these things that we call existential crises. So, regarding natural resources in the DNR, you can disavow climate change if you want to, but to me that's like putting your head in the hole and ignoring the facts of things. But even if you were to do that, there's other markers of a lack of sustainability that we have to start paying attention to. And it includes things like lack of species biodiversity. That's a crisis that's happening right now. If you look at alternate news sites, you'll see a lot of information around like 75% insect die-off studies in Puerto Rico or in a place in Germany that they studied for hundreds of years. We don't really talk about that in the current debate between Walker and Evers, but those are the things that should make us stop and ask ourselves fundamental questions around sustainability and natural resources in the world around us. Or even if, let's say, you disallow those two things, we still see the results of too much phosphorus and nitrogen in our environment from our runoff. We see it in our lakes and our waterways, which is a part of the DNR stuff as well. You'll see it in the south of Florida with red tides killing everything. That's a marker as well that we're living beyond our means. So, long story, written a little bit short, we have to stop looking at our growth paradigm and our economy without looking at the system around us in which we live. So I think we have to use the platform of the governor and in our social contract to talk about these things and make really hard choices. Because the U.S. uses 30% of the global resources, yet we have about 4% of the population. It's not sustainable. We have to find a way to shrink that.
Maggie, you're up to the plate on the last question before the break, and this is a question about electoral reform. In this election cycle, the Republican and Democratic gubernatorial candidates have raised and spent something around $14 million. Some claim this has a corrosive effect on politics. How much have you spent in your campaign, and what changes could you affect as governor that would improve the Wisconsin electoral process?
Right, so my campaign is about a $15,000 campaign, which I actually feel is too much. That is, you know, normal people cannot afford that. And about half of that was raised through small contributions. The other half I put up myself. Because because I really wanted this to happen. I believed in what we can do here. $14–15 million is outrageous. I think that just to look at that incomprehensible amount of money and the impact that it's having on our democracy in the state is it's mind-boggling, and we have to find our way out of this big money trap stranglehold that we're stuck in right now with our democracy. There are a couple ways that we can do this. One is to move. First of all, we're going to just have to be really courageous, and start electing people who stand up to that and are not part of it. And what I would do, my first act actually on day one of becoming governor, would be to instate a governor's commission on election reforms, day one, so that we can begin drafting legislation that'll move us toward ranked choice voting, where you rank all your candidates. You don't just pick one, you rank them, and if your favorite independent candidate doesn't get enough votes to stay in the race, then your vote will still go to your second choice. I do that, I support that as a concession to the fact that we are no longer able to walk into the voting booth and just vote for the best candidate. We need that safety net, so I will support it. But otherwise, I want to look at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and the Marquette Law School, and I want to look at the influence they are having on our elections, because through polling, which is very inaccurate, these people determine who they're going to poll and how they're going to do it, and it actively steers when these polls are reported, they are steering people towards certain outcomes, and I think that's wrong.
Arnie?
Yeah, election reforms, we need it left and right. I already mentioned the American Anti-Corruption Act. And Maggie had said that she'd have them draft legislation. That'd be a great place to start. And whoever gets elected as governor next should do the same thing. We should all demand that. We should make that a central issue to the campaign, if it's at all possible. Because our election process, or electoral process, is a captured market that's owned by the two special interest groups that are the Republican and the Democratic Party. They don't want competition. They won't engage with us. And they don't want to change the laws and the regulations that would allow that system to change. Because those two parties are actually owned by special interest groups and money the lead corporations as well. So they essentially run the system. The system is rigged, and we're getting screwed. And if we don't do something about that, and we change our election process, then we're going to continue going down this path, and it's not going to end well. We have more and more inequality across our society. We have more nationalism, we have more racism. We're emotionally triggered by our system in order to keep us distracted from the fact that, well, we're arguing back and forth around identity politics issues that have become weaponized. Somebody else, aka all folks with money, are reaching and stealing the wallet out of our back pocket and running off with it. So if we don't wake up to that, and I think everybody feels that, everybody knows that, what do you do about it? Well, the answer is to say I'm not going to vote for either one of these two parties because they are a lesser of two evils. And I'm going to think for myself, and we're going to demand that we do stuff like the American Anti-Corruption Act. And real quick too, because I only got 30 seconds, the whole thing on the roads is a great point. I'm a former biker, and we do have the most paved roads in Wisconsin, and it's great for biking. The reason for it, it's the milk industry, all the dairy farms. Back in the day, glass bottles would break if you had gravel roads. So Wisconsin, when we had real dairy farms, rather than these mega dairy farms, these CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, which spread fertilizer and poison throughout our system. Before those things came into place, when we had real dairy farms, we needed that road system.
And how much was your campaign?
Oh, I spent about $450 bucks.
Okay, Bill?
We've raised and spent about $16,000 so far, and almost all of that, except for maybe $500, has been raised by contributions from people of $250 or less over the course of the year, so that we've been actively campaigning. I'd like to agree with everything that's been said so far. One of the big problems, obviously, is that if people are willing to sell themselves, then they'll be bought. So right now we have Republicans and Democrats who are so desperate to stay in power, that is their job. The basic economy of politics is there are large corporate interests that want to have advantage in the economy. The best way to do that is to pay politicians and political parties, and often they pay both sides, Republicans and Democrats. Forgive me for saying both sides, I know there's more than two sides. We're trying to get good on our language about two-party system, trying to erase that. Forgive me, Maggie. But there's two, they pay both sides, and what they pay them for is to enact legislation and maintain a monopoly so that those with moneyed interests maintain their competitive advantage. We see that in terms of the rhetoric of this campaign and why we're being excluded. But in almost every situation, government, whether it's Democrat or Republicans, exert some sort of influence over the economy or over people's behavior or over the rhetoric, over whatever it is, and they trade that for the campaign contributions and then allow them to exclude the rest of us from the conversation and for them to maintain power. If you've been watching television at all the last couple of days, every commercial break, 3 minutes long, is 6 political commercials, sometimes more than one from the same candidate. They're trying to drive people either away, I'd argue, by pissing people off, forgive my French, and making them uninterested in politics because it's so negative, and then the people that are partisans that can be excited by fear, envy, and anger to go to the polls and to make them believe that this is the most important election in their lifetimes. The only reason that this election is important because there's 4 very qualified people up here running for governor, and none of us are in favor of dirty politics. We're all in favor of cleaning it up, and that's why we're all excluded.
Mike?
My campaign has raised less than $1,000. 80% is my own money. Part of it is that I wasn't real good about finding help right off the bat, and I only recently acquired the help that I really needed to start going out and getting money and more support. I want to tell you something really good that has happened. First of all, your election workers, the people that work in the polls, are doing that out of love for their country and out of love for the process. And I have nothing negative to say about the people that work up, all the way up to the Wisconsin Election Commission, because I dealt with them personally during the last recount. I'm not going to ask what you thought about the last recount because we don't have time, but I will tell you the results, and I'm sure that most of you don't know the results. Never mind who won. As a result of the recount, which the Green Party asked for, and which Jill Stein got $7 million donated in 2 weeks from across the country, we learned that our voting machines can be hacked, that our voting machines have problems, and as a result of her standing up for your vote, a whole class of voting machines has been decertified in Wisconsin permanently. Next week, Tuesday, 5% of the votes will be hand counted in a risk-limiting audit. So as governor, one of the things that I would do is I would emphasize transparency. That's number one. Number two, I do want everybody to take 2 seconds. Look around in this room. How many black people do you see? How many people of color? This country right now is changing. I've lived in 10 states, 2 foreign countries. I've served in 2 branches of the military. I grew up in the Detroit area, which was 70% black when I lived there. We are now a rainbow country, and both parties, to some degree, have been trying to keep all those other voices out. So one of the things that I would do is everything I can to make it easy to vote, to get people engaged. We would have a very different country if everybody voted, and I'm done.
We've come to the end of the 58 minutes that was allotted for the broadcast time. We're going to take a couple-minute break, and then we will come back and finish the questions. The rest of the forum can actually be heard online, but the 58 minutes was allotted for broadcast radio that will be aired perhaps as early as tomorrow. So 5:08, you're back at, okay?
Thanks.
If you wish to direct one, you can. No, there was nothing provided about.
Yeah, I talked about it.
1 minute.
Does the audience know we're taking Q&A from them?
There's been some discussion about whether or not.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back on. So all we need is one more candidate.
Oh, you got 30 seconds, once you say so, once you introduce yourself. Then the way you train that law, so they can.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating stuff.
All right, hey, hi, how's it going? It's all good.
Oh, yeah. They're all over it. I don't know about the shorts.
I'm talking to them like. Yeah. Be your next governor, so you better not get tired of it. Live radio broadcast for 4 hours a day on every radio station in Wisconsin. Totally propaganda, everyone.
It will not be a taxpayer expense.
No. Well, except me, yes. We're still working on that.
Will, has Michael dropped out of the race? Oh, here he is.
No, Michael was talking to the media, talking about how terrible all the other candidates are.
That's what I thought too.
So when if there's any questions,
That's the way to talk to what's the name of stuff, so there's this one, it's acquisition cost. So low. Yeah.
Well, some of the questions from the audience. Also, before we get started,
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to everybody that showed up and is persevering with our long-windedness, because this is an important part of the democratic process, and thank you. Tell your friends, tell them what they missed.
We will.
Next time, free pizza.
And I'll add, even though I'm not the first person to say this, but you probably already figured it out, that any of the four of us would be better governors than Walker. That's why. That's why. And we're not on the stage, because they have a monopoly on the process.
Yeah, all we ask is that you vote for somebody who showed up today.
Well, at least that's all we're going to ask right now. We all have our preferred candidates, I think. But
And this is what government could look like.
this
right?
is what these
our
forms could look
election
like.
process.
As opposed to what you saw in WBA debates where it was, he's a liar, or especially the U.S. Senate one was
That
terrible.
was horrible.
She's a liar, making stuff up, exaggerating.
Yeah.
We're acknowledging that we agree on things, but you almost never see the red.
Miles, are you ready?
We're ready.
You guys can start.
Okay, all righty. Let's see, Philip, you're up on to bat on this one.
I'm going to refer this to my lieutenant governor candidate, whatever the question.
Whatever the question is, all right? Now we can actually relax because we no longer constrained by anything besides the darkness. Corporate tax credits and subsidies in the name of job creation have been big news, both with the potential costs for $4.1 billion to attract Foxconn to southeastern Wisconsin, and then shortly after the election, legislators will be debating a similar incentive for Kimberly Clark, which is right in our neighborhood. Do you support ideas like these? How should Wisconsin attract new businesses to employ our citizens?
We do not support any of these giveaways by the state. One of the misconceptions that people have about libertarians is that we are big friends of the corporations and that we want to get the government out of people's lives so the corporations can just run everything. Nothing could be further from the truth. What you have right now, you don't have a free market, you don't have capitalism in this country, you have a corporatism, which is the corporations collude with the Democrat and Republican parties to get benefits like the Foxconn deal, to get special tax breaks, to get special favors from the government in order to get advantages in the marketplace. We believe that the marketplace ought to be free of any government-sponsored advantages, that companies ought to compete with one another based on the quality of their products, the quality of their services, the price of their products, those sorts of things. And they should succeed or fail based on that. And the government should have no intervention in any of that. So we oppose all forms of government giveaways. If Phil is elected governor, he will immediately disband the WEDC. He will eliminate that entire function of government. We'll look to rid the tax code of any special favors that are being handed out to any corporations. And to stimulate the economy, one of the things that we are in favor of is eliminating the state income tax. We believe that would stimulate the economy by itself. A lot of small businesses in particular file their taxes through the personal income tax, so that would be an immediate boost to small businesses all over the state. And it wouldn't be regionalized like Foxconn, it would literally be all over the state. So that would also create a job climate that would be more favorable. Companies and individuals would be more likely to move to Wisconsin. Certainly if you were a young person right coming right out of college and you had skills to offer an employer, you might want to think about moving to a state that had no income tax versus one that had a very high income tax, let's say. So rather than spending money like Scott Walker has on trying to attract millennials back to Wisconsin, we would just do that through the elimination of the income tax.
Arnie?
Excellent. I don't have a lieutenant governor hand this off to, so I'll answer it myself. Good job, though, Patrick. Here to speak. So the question about government subsidies to businesses in order to grow an economy. We already heard me pitch the fact that I don't think we should be growing our economy. We should actually be looking at smart ways in which we shrink what we do ultimately in terms of our consumption and our materialism. But to address Foxconn, the number I use is $4.5 billion when you factor in all the tax credits as well that would kick in over the course of how they have the contract structured. I've used this argument before, but that's $4.5 billion placed in a bet on one company. If you were to do the math, that's $62 million per county, $62 million for every one of the 72 counties in Wisconsin that they could spend on development if you do choose to go down the path of economic development. To me, that makes a lot more sense because then you grow local companies. And you do need local companies because transnational corporations don't give a rat's patoot about Wisconsin ultimately. They only care about what they can extract from it. They care about their shareholders. Most of them do not live in Wisconsin. So what I would like to do is encourage business development of local organic companies that are truly sustainable. And as an example, we could use Kimberly-Clark, which used to be a local company. And they were very much a benefactor of the community. They formed the city of Kimberly-Clark, right? They also have Shattuck Park, Shattuck High School in Neenah, Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. During the Great Depression, Kimberly-Clark went from 3 shifts to 4 shifts, so more people had jobs because they cared about the community, because they're a local company. You think Foxconn's going to do that? I don't, right? So we should be placing our investments in local companies and in Wisconsin organizations, not in transnational corporations that are here to take Great Lakes water and get the best deal they can get in terms of tax benefits.
Maggie?
Yeah, I'm actually going to pass this one off to Will.
You know, there's a lot of areas we could talk about this one. When I was driving down here today, I passed a billboard and I want to paraphrase it. It said something to the effect that Wisconsin doesn't pay unless or until Foxconn grows. And so, and couldn't see who paid for that ad. Clearly it was something that supported the current governor and the Republican deal making there. And I just thought that is so absurd on so many levels. So the idea that Wisconsin taxpayers will only pay if this company comes in and grows, thinking, wasn't this the party that wants to dress themselves in free market principles? It's irresponsible government, I think, at best. And it's, you know, just bad deal making and being greedy at worst. If it's such a good deal, then why don't our favorite local small pizza joints or restaurants get incentives that if you grow a certain amount, then you get some money back from the state? So it's not sustainable. I think we just got to go back to what is the basic role of government. The basic role of government is to protect individual rights, allow us, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of our own happiness, as long as we're not getting other people's way. And say in the 21st century, with some of the issues we face, another role of government is to help citizens have information so they can weigh costs and benefits. And giving incentives to out-of-state, out-of-country corporations doesn't fall under those two. It's irresponsible at best.
Michael?
I'm going to take these really good examples I've had and pass this to my lieutenant governor candidate because she's got better ideas than I do.
So we do not support the Foxconn deal. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a way to completely eliminate now that the process has been begun. But we need to make sure this does not happen with future corporations. You look at Foxconn, and we are giving approximately $4.5 billion to this foreign corporation to come in. We have waived several environmental laws or regulations, including our wetlands and the amount of water they're able to take from Lake Michigan. We have no real guarantee on how they're returning the water back to Lake Michigan. So I think what we have to do as far as Foxconn is concerned is continue to monitor what they're doing as a business. I mean, you look at you know, Foxconn in China and how they have treated their workers. Is that the types of jobs we want to bring to Wisconsin? I think we'd be much better off bringing in jobs that would help our energy, right? Clean energy jobs. We could instead invest into windmills and solar energy and have sustainable long-term jobs in Wisconsin as opposed to these shorter-term jobs. You know, Foxconn is automating all over the world. Why do we think Wisconsin would be any different?
I'll jump in and say that Foxconn deal is a Pruitt. We need no more Pruitt. It's short-term benefit for a corporation without any long-term benefit for the people. Planet, people, principle ahead of profit. There's an organization nationally called Move to Amend. In Wisconsin, it's called United to Amend. Get corporate dollars out of politics. remove corporate personhood. That's how we're going to address it. No, I would not support giveaways.
Very good, thank you very much. Arnie, you're up first on this one. Healthcare is one of the major concerns of all citizens as we enter the midterm elections. The uninsured rate in Wisconsin has gone down by 42% since the introduction of the Affordable Care Act, from 9.1% in 2013 to 5.3% in 2016. Wisconsin ranks 17th in healthcare coverage, apparently. Do you support the Affordable Care Act? What would you do to improve healthcare for Wisconsinites?
All right, I addressed this a little bit before. We were talking about funding question with it, but I'll take a little different tact in answering it this time. Yeah, we should take the money from the federal government in order to expand our healthcare coverage in the United States and drive those uninsured coverage rates down even more. That's within the short-term perspective the best thing to do because it's going to help more people. But long-term, again, we have to fundamentally reform our healthcare system because of what I talked about previously with the broken nature of it and the amount of our GDP that goes towards healthcare. Again, 18% is excessive, when the national average for these OECD market-based democracies is about 9%. So you can't do this just as a governor, right? You need legislation and you need to have people support it. But I would say the Affordable Care Act was a good start, but they were corrupted by the lobbyists and the special interest groups and the doctors and the insurance companies and the pharmaceuticals. So it's a good, bad law, right? It helped people, pre-existing conditions were covered, and we were able to offer coverage up to the age of 26 for dependent children. Those are good things, but we need to go further than that because they didn't address fundamental issues. They try to band-aid over them to maintain the illusion of a crony capitalism system which benefits from a broken healthcare system. So why doesn't Wisconsin take the lead on this? Why don't you elect somebody such as myself, or Maggie, or Dr. White, or Phil, and let's change that. I don't think Phil will do the same thing, but why don't we say, let's write our own healthcare law and have it be single-payer healthcare in the state of Wisconsin and do all these sorts of things in order to structurally reform it. Well, at the same time, we make personal accountability a part of it as well, because you can't just treat every medical condition as a symptom that you take a pill for. A lot of it has to do with what's the root cause of your illness. And it reaches across a broad spectrum of answers, but it's more exercise, it's healthier diets, it's getting away from meat and processed foods. I mean, it's like Michael Pollan said, eat food, real food, mostly plants, not too much. It's not that complicated. That would take care of so much more healthcare problems, it's ridiculous.
Dr. Phil? Phil?
Oh, no, Patrick's going to take this one.
Okay.
So, does anyone seriously believe what the politicians are trying to tell us right now, which is government intervention is going to make your health insurance be cheaper? Does anybody really believe that? I certainly don't. We're opposed to any further government interventions in healthcare. We'd like to roll back those that have already been put in place, including Obamacare. It's important to point out, Scott Walker is going to be bailing out Obamacare here in Wisconsin to the tune of $200 million of taxpayer money. So the guy who just a year ago, when he was running for president, wanted to get rid of Obamacare is now bailing it out. And let's be clear, it's a bailout for the insurance companies. It's reinsurance. What he's doing is he's basically underwriting the profit line of the insurance companies that are losing money on the Obamacare plans. So both parties have failed miserably at their opportunity to reform healthcare. We would support any number of different forms of healthcare in this country. One of the things that the Republicans originally supported and kind of forgot about was getting rid of the tax deduction for employers for health care so that your employment would no longer be tied to your health care. Moving it away from employer-based out into buying groups, large buying groups around the country where you would go to something very much like the Obamacare exchange, a private exchange where you would shop for plans through a large buying pool. The example I always use is the Knights of Columbus, for instance. All the Catholic charities would combine together so that all of the Catholic churches in America and all of their parishioners and anybody outside of the Catholic Church would be able to buy a plan through an exchange through a nonprofit group like that. Health savings accounts. We can expand health savings accounts to allow people to save money. Employers, ex-husbands, non-custodial parents, the government could put money into those health savings accounts to help pay for the cost of plans. Currently, Trump has changed this, but you generally can't use those plans to pay for premiums. So there's a lot of things we can do that do not require government intervention.
Dr. Turnbull.
Yeah, I would like everybody to hear a little bit more from my running mate, Will.
I think healthcare is like education right now in this country. That I think it's okay for us to just breathe and realize that we got some big tectonic plates moving. That the reason the Democrats and Republicans haven't solved it is because it's hard. There's so many variables, and I think just recognizing that, then politically, even us third-party independents and the D's and R's can stop the finger pointing. A metaphor is imagine trying to retool an airplane engine while it's flying. And by the way, you gotta convert it to metric too, while you're doing it. That's what we're facing. We're an aging population, there's a lot of variables. I think there's been some interesting ideas here. I think shifting insurance to non-employer based. There was a time and place in our country's history that was an incentive and that was part of our growing economy. Maybe it needs to be more like auto insurance, where if my insurance company knows that I can just walk across the street and get something different, they're gonna treat me better. And maybe they're not gonna try and shake me down as much. I think we also gotta recognize that maybe our costs are a lot more than other countries because we got a lot of middle people. We have a lot of people that make their livelihoods off of medicine, but they have nothing to do with the assessment or delivery of medical services. That's neither good nor bad, that's just what is. So we gotta recognize what we're paying for. On a philosophical level, and I don't know if this is the role of government, but maybe we also just need to have some honest conversations about where the costs are. A lot of the costs come in our first couple days of life, or the last couple months. And so what is a dignified death? What does it mean to die with dignity? And do families need to have those conversations about, what's going to be paid and not paid for and things like that? And again, I don't know that that's the role of government, but I think a governor's office or lieutenant governor can maybe facilitate those conversations because there's a lot of layers to this, and no party has the answer.
Yeah, Dr. White.
So I tried to hand this off to Tiffany and said, no, wait a minute, you're the doctor. This is your issue. You got to talk about it, which I think is fair. I am a doctor. I've been practicing since 1978. I practiced in the military, both in the Navy and in the Air Force. I had a private practice. Now I work for a healthcare organization. I'm one of the people that designed and built TRICARE, which is the military insurance for active duty for their dependents and retirees. And I was involved in designing a contract, so I know how complicated it is, just like Will talks about it. And it's not going to be simple. But the first place that I would start is two things. One of which is we need access for everybody somehow. So it's interesting to me that we don't have the lowest infant death rate in the world. We don't have the best programs for providing immunizations. When I lived in Ohio, pediatricians stopped giving immunizations in some cases because they got paid less by the government to store and administer vaccinations than they had to pay for the vaccine to buy it, to get it to their office. I would control costs to the extent that it's possible for the governor's office to do this. But again, costs are running totally out of control. The other things that I agree, it's been said that should not be based on employment. I agree we should find a way to give minimal access, a basic level of health care to everybody, and then start working on all the other parts. We don't have the best healthcare system in the world, only the most expensive. Picking on drug companies again, for those biologics you see advertised on TV, I sat down and did the math. One of my patients has a sister who lives in Canada. So I know what it costs to buy it in Canada, and I know what it costs to buy that drug here. Never mind which drug, because they're all about the same. For the cost, the retail cost in the United States, per month, I could send my patient with a first-class ticket from Chicago to Montreal, give her a hotel room for a week, give her her medicine, and give her $1,000. That's wrong. I'm done.
Okay, Michael, you're not quite done because you're up to the next question.
Oh, darn. Go.
Residents of Milwaukee's 53206 zip code have the dubious distinction of being the source of more incarcerations than any other in our nation. Wisconsin has the highest percentage of incarcerated black men among all 50 states. We spend more in prisons than we do on education. Minnesota is imprisoning half as many people as Wisconsin with the same crime rate. Do you believe Wisconsin's incarceration rate is reasonable? And if not, what should be done about it?
I'm gonna pass this one to Tiffany, because she's got some really good answers, and I agree with everything she says.
Say, it is not acceptable to be spending more on prisons than on schools. We definitely, the first thing we need to do is legalize marijuana. Say, not only will that decrease the amount of people going to prison, we could also pardon those who have nonviolent marijuana convictions. Get those out of the prisons, or those people out of the prisons. Beyond that, it also will help with funding when we legalize marijuana, correct? The Wisconsin Department of Revenue estimates $138 million per year. So not only can we decrease the amount of people in our prisons by legalizing, we can increase our revenue.
I think that, again, point around, look at the number of black people in this room. I'm going to tell you flat out that we have racial divides in this state and in this country that are unresolved. We actually don't know what our black brothers and sisters, our Native American brothers and sisters, and our immigrant brothers and sisters have to cope with. Tiffany and I in the Green Party, in reality, everybody at this table is going to tell you that the country is changing. We need to get those people involved in the conversation so we have a real democracy, and that will solve the incarceration problem when we have more black people and brown people and Asian people in our police force, and we have community policing that is part of the community they live in. And I think with that we'll stop.
Maggie?
Yep, I agree with what we just heard, and I would add that we need to fund schools. We need to fund schools in inner cities, and inner city Milwaukee is especially problematic. There's extreme disparity in terms of what kind of educational opportunities are available for children as they're growing up and what kind of support they have while they're at school. Will and I both believe in phasing out the voucher program because it siphons money away from our public schools. In this inner city of Milwaukee, that, my own personal view is that the voucher program is actually a lifeline for a lot of children who are there. And I don't think it's right to go yanking that rug out from under them until we have rectified the disparities between the public school districts. So, there's a right order in which to do things. But it really does begin with educational opportunities. And then, let's get these laws off the books that are, they serve no purpose other than to populate our prisons and aren't making anybody safer or healthier. And the cannabis laws are a great example of that. If you are a minority, you are more likely to be stopped, you're more likely to be searched, you're more likely to be charged, you're more likely to get the harshest possible sentence. And then, it's a downward spiral from there. Our prisons are not set up to reform people or to enable them to re-enter society and have a lot of good quality opportunities to contribute. They are set up so that they come out worse than when they went in. And when it's an offense that is such a minor thing as possession of marijuana, that's not a danger to society, and we're basically putting them into a criminal university system so that they come out, experts in how to commit real crime, that is a problem.
Arnie?
I agree with these guys again. You're going to hear that a lot. You have heard it a lot. And I'm going to also foreshadow this by saying Phil's going to have really good answers to this as well. And I'm not going to say too much more than the fact that I think, yes, marijuana should be legalized. Yes, we should pardon everybody that's in prison for a nonviolent drug offense right now, and that we should decriminalize not just marijuana, I believe other classifications of drugs, which I'm open to conversation around. And we should tax it. It's a weed, after all. It grows anywhere. And we should use it for its benefit rather than being fearful of it. So I'll give a bit of back or two and let Phil give us his great answers here.
Are you yielding to me?
Oh, heck yeah.
Wow, so I'll take the rest of Arnie's time and then my own, because we actually have a relatively long plan, but it's very, very important. So I'll just start and you can do your timekeeping however you want. Thanks for acknowledging the facts of the situation in the question and my fellow candidates as well. Let's admit and realize for once and for all and forever that the drug war is racist. It is racist in its results, certainly, and we now know that it's racist in its intent. We need to solve that because it's a justice problem in our country, in our state. Not only do we need to legalize marijuana for recreational purposes, but for medicinal purposes as well. In particular, our veterans suffer. We send them overseas. Raise your hand if you're anti-war. Raise your hand if you're anti-war. Another reason why we're not on the stage with Republicans and Democrats is because we're anti-war. We send people overseas to suffer, to kill and be killed, and come back and then get hooked on opioids through a VA system that does a crappy job of taking care of our veterans. And if they have the opportunity to use marijuana as medicine before they're hooked on opioids, after they're hooked on opioids to come off of it, that's true justice. So we need to legalize it for those reasons, and there's many more too. But the rest of my plan is this. Number two, we need to get rid of mandatory minimum sentencing because that handcuffs judges to the point where they can't actually enact justice from the bench. Judges are appointed and elected to be experts on the legal system, to take everyone into account, and when we tie them to mandatory minimums, they're handcuffed in terms of enacting true justice. We need to bring back jury nullification. Raise your hand if you know what jury nullification is. Thank you. Jury nullification is the constitutional right that a jury has to say somebody's not guilty for something, not by virtue of the fact that they didn't actually do it, but by virtue of the fact that the law is unjust. And our state Supreme Court obstructs that and does not allow defense attorneys to tell juries that they have that right. That is tremendously unjust, and it takes away power from people in juries. Number three, Dr. White talks about things that we can't do as sitting in the governor's chair. One thing we can't do is a line item veto. Another one is to pardon people who are in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. We can start to correct that injustice right away. I will start signing pardons as soon as I'm elected governor. I forget what number I'm on. Number 5. Thank you. Expunging records. So those people that have been put in jail for these things over the years, that should be completely off the record. We can do that administratively, and we can do it quickly. Number 6 is people who are in jail should be allowed to vote. Unless they've committed voter fraud or identity fraud, they are not part of our political system, and there's no reason they shouldn't be. Just because they've committed a felony or a crime, they should still be able to vote. They're unrepresented, and that's deleterious to their lives for the rest of their lives. Last of all, let's get rid of cash bail. The idea that somebody can be arrested, arraigned, and then let out if they've got enough money to return to their family, and if they don't have enough money, they're more likely to lose their jobs and possibly lose their family relationships, is an abrogation of justice. So there's 7 points. Thank you very much, Arnie. I appreciate it. Right now, and forgive me, Tony Evers is weak on that.
That's why I deferred, because Phil's right. I can't say anything better. He's got so much on this, it's ridiculous.
I've been preaching this for a
And
while.
as a doctor, I totally support medical cannabis. There's a lot of benefits.
This is the final prepared question for the participants. And Maggie, I'm going to ask you to go first on this one. In 2011, Wisconsin introduced strict voter ID laws. According to a 2017 survey of non-voters by 2 UW-Madison political scientists, these laws deferred up to 17,000 registered voters, potentially even more. However, many supporters of these laws claim they prevent voter fraud. Do you believe our voting laws are suppressing the vote, and what would you do as a governor to encourage democracy?
So voter fraud is not occurring. This is a mythology. This is not a major issue for our state. Yes, we want to make sure that the people who are voting are citizens of Wisconsin, but this fear of voter fraud is way overblown. So the thing is, though, that the current party of power knows that the higher turnout we get for our elections, the more it hurts them, really. They benefit from suppressing voter turnout. That's the Republican Party. This is well known. So what I'm in favor of is getting rid of all these obstacles to voting. So automatic voter registration. If you interact with the DMV for any reason, you are registered to vote. You can opt out if you want to, but default is you're registered. Voting by mail. Other states have gone to voting by mail. No more public polling places. You just vote from the comfort of your home. Maybe you look at the ballot. Maybe you do some research. Maybe you talk about it with your family. Maybe it becomes a social exercise. And everybody's ballot is personally escorted by the U.S. Postal Service to where it needs to go. There aren't boxes of ballots hanging around. in town halls and whatnot. And if it snows, you still get to vote, because we all know the U.S. Postal Service will still show up to get your ballot. So there are things that we can do. And then, of course, moving towards ranked choice voting that I already described, so that that whole system works, empowers your vote, and no fear of wasting your vote. But we also want to make sure that the voting procedures and how to register people to vote are very clear, especially with an aging population where more people are spending time in assisted living and whatnot, so that staff members there know how to get everybody registered and voting.
Bill?
It's a very delicate balance, I think, to draw between making sure the people are voting, should be voting, and the people, and having as much access as possible. I agree with Maggie 100% that the party in power in Wisconsin certainly has an interest in suppressing voters, and nationally as well, the Republicans have done a job of that. But we also do know that voter fraud does exist, at least in some places. I don't know about Wisconsin, but we know that in Chicago, regularly dead people vote somehow. So the issue of finding a way to making sure that our elections represent the will of the people is a delicate one. But what we can do, and some of the things that Maggie mentioned, making it easy as possible to register, as easy as possible to vote, using online voting in addition to mail voting. If we can bank online and transfer thousands or millions of dollars across governmental borders all day with more or less 100% security, there should be ways, including not only electronic systems that occur now, but that exist now, but blockchain technology, which allows for things to be completely verified across a disparate bunch of computers and users, so they're easily verifiable. So I don't acknowledge that voter fraud doesn't exist. And I guarantee if we had a system that was too easy, that our political parties, both of them are corrupt, would find ways to manipulate that by having voters vote that shouldn't be voting. Voting is a right and a privilege. It's something that we should do, something that I agree with her in that we should have automatic voter registration in every way, shape, and form that's possible. But we can't pretend that the problem doesn't exist, and that it might get a lot worse if we make it extremely easy to vote and don't have some sort of balance to it.
Michael?
I'm going to say that I'm retired military and that voting is a duty as well as a privilege, and you all damn well better vote. After that, I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany because she has got some insight.
So when I first heard about the voter ID law, I thought, oh great, this will stop voter fraud. Not realizing that it's only a fraction of a percent of, people commit voter fraud. And I thought everybody has an ID. That is untrue. So I got a job. I am currently a human resource staffing professional, and part of my job is doing I-9s, making sure people are, eligible to work in the U.S. legally, and they need to provide a photo ID to do that. I cannot tell you how many people, probably within the first year of working there, I've had dozens and dozens of people who did not have an ID and had trouble getting an ID to get a job. So when we're adding that extra obstacle in for people to vote, they're not going to do it. So we need to get rid of that, considering it stops a fraction of a percent of people from committing voter fraud. The real issue is election integrity, making sure that our votes are counted and counted accurately. I was part of the recount in 2016 and was able to see the machines being connected cellularly to the internet. That should not be happening. I was also able to see how many votes from early votes and absentee ballots were not counted. The issue is not voter fraud, the issue is election integrity and making sure our votes are counted. I also agree with the fact that we should have an easier time registering. Everybody at the age of 18 should be registered to vote and have the option to opt out instead of having to go through the process of proving that they are citizens and residing in that state or city. We need to make it easier, and we also need to make sure our children high schoolers are educated on how to vote and what their civic duties are.
The rumor that you're going to have chips implanted to vote is probably not true.
Arnie?
Lots of good points, but really voter fraud barely ever happens. It's literally a handful of times, meaning less than 5. But yet that's the thing that's used in order to stoke fear on, hey, your votes are getting counted, but fake people are voting. doesn't really happen. The bigger issue is election integrity. Our voting machines are oftentimes old, they jam, information gets lost. There are dozens and dozens of businesses in Wisconsin in the last election where votes weren't counted because the machines had problems or there's problems with processes and procedures. So, but again, these are percentages of things. If you look at stuff from a statistical perspective as you're doing this, you have to say, what's the cost of accuracy? Because the more accuracy you have, the more it costs. The most accurate way to do voting is to do paper-based voting. It had to be in transparent windows, right? That's where go the word transparency. There's no hiding, there's no way to really corrupt that as long as you maintain chain of custody in those votes. But voting should be easier. We should have more people vote. We should have a national holiday for midterm and presidential elections. We should have it be a multi-day process as well. People have a lot of difficulties in life with family obligations and multiple jobs oftentimes. And voting isn't easy. We should make it easier from that perspective. We should allow people to register through anytime they interact with the government or organizations that they're a part of. And it's a democracy because it's about people. Demos is people in Greek, and that's why it's called democracy. It should be people voting, and we should make it easier for folks to do it. I got more, but we'll wrap this up a little bit so we get out of here in time to get home for the Packer game.
Well, that brings an end to the prepared questions. If you're a UW-Oshkosh student, would you raise your hand? If you are a UW-Oshkosh student and have a question, would you ask it now? Yes, Ian.
So I'm just wondering about, I think, money in politics, and I guess this is kind of a different question, but it is for all of you guys. If you guys were given the option, if there was an investor that came up to you and said, I'll write you a check for $50,000 for your campaign, would you take it? I know raising money can be hard when you're a third-party candidate, but if somebody were to come up to you and offer you that amount of money, would you take it for the sake of getting your name out there and getting more votes?
You each have 1 minute. A yes or no would be adequate.
Yes. With the understanding that I've already made a public commitment to not meet with lobbyists in the as governor. So there'd be a clear understanding at the get-go that there's not a quid pro quo, there's no expectations afterward, but I would accept it. If I want to contribute to my campaign on those conditions, yes.
Okay. No, I would not, even though I would like to use the money for honorable purposes. I also belong to the organization nofreelunch.org. As a physician, no drug company ever takes me out to lunch, buys me anything, or gives me anything. I believe that we have to set an example.
I don't know if I would or not. It depends on who it is, and it depends on if I have total 100% freedom to spend that money how I want to, and never hear from them again. In fact, I don't even want to know who they are.
No, I would not take it, and it's because this thing that I'm doing is kind of my own quixotic adventure, tilting out windmills, and I want to maintain a certain amount of purity with it. And anybody here take a philosophy class at Oshkosh? It's a great school, right? That's where I took a whole bunch of philosophy classes. There's this dude named Immanuel Kant. He had this thing called the categorical imperative. And what that means is essentially, not only do you have to do the right things, you have to do the right things for the right reasons. And money corrupts. Power corrupts. Because money is power in our society. And if you look through our biblical stories and our religious stories, both Jesus and Buddha turned down power, right? You can't accept power, you can't accept money, you have to do the right things for the right reasons. And yeah, it sounds crazy. You're like, you're never going to win with an attitude like that because you need money in today's world. Well, money's part of the problem in today's world. It's the only form of social trust that we have. We have to move past that, both in how we interact with each other in an economic perspective. Again, old Greek dude, economy, the root word of that is Greek household, right? So we have to get back to living in community and doing the right things for the right reasons, not making it all about money. So take the $50,000 and shove it.
Nice.
This is from the man whose campaign is $450. Is there any other student that has a question? Yes?
So I guess specifically talking to college students like ourselves, do you guys have any small advice for why you would be a good candidate to represent our demographic? Besides everything that wonderful that you said so far.
I'll go first. Because we need you. Yeah, I need you. Because you're not going to change the old system. I really have a deep-seated fear that we can't change what's already underway. We need new people. We need the next generation to build the new. Because the old, as it currently exists, is dead already and just doesn't know it. And too many people are too entrenched in thought patterns and their way of looking at the world and this culture in which we live in, that they can't see past it. And I would offer up myself to you guys as somebody that can help, but it's got to come from you. I love seeing about a dozen, 2 dozen students here. I wish we had the whole place filled with them. Free pizza would have done it, but again, I couldn't take the money. But yeah, get involved, do stuff. You guys have to build it because, yeah, and it's not a cop-out. I want to try to help, and I know a lot of older folks want to help, but we got to build the new, and you guys are the new. Make it happen.
Yeah, I guess when I think about, you as college students and where I was at mentally and just looking toward the future as a college student, what we need, or what I was looking for in college was a leader who could really deliver the message in an inspirational way and get the point across and had principles that I could align with, but also was committed to creating a system that would respond to you, as the years go on. So, ranked choice voting, we're never going to get that out of the two-party system. They are very heavily invested in making sure they have as minimal competition as possible. So electing people who have fresh ideas about how government can operate, and that those ideas are specifically aimed at increasing your own influence in government policymaking and the accountability of government to you, I think is what makes a good candidate.
If you haven't noticed yet, I'm an old white guy. I'm old enough that I was active in demonstrating against the Vietnam War, and was active in campus efforts to change the way our government moved. And if you guys didn't notice because you weren't born yet, it worked. It was the resistance across the country that caused the government to change the way it was prosecuting that war and get out of the war. So it isn't the case that you need me, I need you to get involved to save your future. You have the energy, you have insight about things that I don't know anything about, you can energize a new political future, a Green New Deal, a new way of doing things, because what we're doing isn't working. So the promise that I would make to you is if I get elected and as I work on things after this election, I want people like you to get involved, to come up with new ideas, think that this old brain hasn't thought about. I am receptive to new ideas and I need people like you to get involved.
Well, I agree that we need you to be involved in the political process, but actually you need us too. You're going to be alive on this earth and involved in the economy and society for another 60, 70 years. Some of us are already past our halfway point in that process. But unless you step up now and are willing to put yourself forward and to set aside the right, left, red team, blue team, conservative, liberal sort of labels that are put on the political system, then things won't change. Dr. White pointed out the Vietnam War protests, and those were fantastic. Right now we have a two-party system, both of whom are happy to go to war all over the world, and send you there, and your neighbors there, and your friends there, and there's no opposition to that currently in the establishment parties. There's also no real opposition to money being involved in politics. They're both on the same gravy train, Democrats and Republicans. So unless you act now and start getting involved now, then that will continue, and you'll always have the two parties that you have. Often we get asked, all of us, I believe, or get harassed with this, well, I'm not going to vote for you because you're not going to win, and they end up falling for the lesser of two evils. Well, if you don't make a change now, if you don't decide to throw away that whole paradigm, all the choices you will have for the rest of your life on this earth and this country will be the two evils. It's time to start now because there's a lot to do to get that getting rid of.
In the turn of the 20th century, in North Dakota, the farmers were having trouble getting loans, so the Eastern Financiers thought, oh, this is an advantage for a land grab. The response was, in North Dakota, they formed a public state bank. It's one of the only states that's been in the black consistently, so you probably know where I'm going. What do you guys think about the public banking movement in California and various other states? And would you support a public bank in Wisconsin?
My answer is short, so I'll go first. I really don't know enough about the issue, but anything that helps isolate our state and the citizens and residents of our state from the fiasco that our Federal Reserve system is and the ups and downs and the inflation of the currency, I'm all for.
I actually sit on the Green Party national platform, and one of the committees has been looking at a public state bank. And what I've learned is a lot more complicated than I thought. I think I'm in favor of it because it does protect the citizenry. But what I would do is I'd go to the universities and as well as to banks, but I would especially go to the universities and find out what are the facts, what are the rules, how would it be beneficial? But I'm open to the concept.
Yeah, I think due diligence in sussing out the idea, how it would fit in Wisconsin, what are some of the differences between Wisconsin and North Dakota and other states that are using it that we would want to make sure that we account for. And I don't have too much to add beyond that. I don't know, Will, if you want to add any thoughts?
Well, it's not a topic I know a ton about, or given a lot of thought to. My initial question would be, and maybe this is playing off of Phil's position, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but maybe that was my conception of libertarianism. I don't think the solution to federal fiasco of financing is to come up with state government of financing. Unless it plays into the dynamic of state, that push-pull dynamic that our system intentionally has built into states versus feds, so it's not that conflict's bad, but I'd have to study more of how it was done in North Dakota, and just see how it could or couldn't be manipulated, because the devil's in the details for any government program.
Hey, Tom, thanks for asking that question. I do know a bit about this. I've asked the Democratic Party nomination for was it the Secretary of Treasury if she would do this, and she said no, she won't. I think we should. I think North Dakota has a great model. There's this dude named Michael Hudson. He's kind of a contrarian economist at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and they have great thoughts on alternate economic models around public financing. You get lower rates that you pay. You essentially pay the citizens more for bond issuances and the like than you would go through commercial banks. But that's how come we have the Fed. The Fed is not a government institution. It's a private institution that's chartered by the government. And what we have to do is find ways in order to allow different ways of managing our currency besides giving it up to the processes and script-based and the fiat currencies that we have today. This would tie back in with this whole thing on how we've gotten to be excessively growth-oriented in GDP because money's divorced from physical tangible assets. We have to find ways to plug that back together. My 1 minute's up. I'll talk about this more later.
Well, just a quick follow-on. It's a parking place for our tax dollars. So instead of our money going to JP Morgan Chase before it's spent, it goes to a public bank. We can leverage that credit for good things.
It's a good fact.
And I'll just add that every single time I come to one of these forums with you guys, I end up learning a lot of interesting things, so thank you.
So I think that we probably should wrap up. I think there's a baseball game tonight. Is it a little serious yet? Are there any other really burning questions that the audience needs to answer, or perhaps would like to come down and maybe speak privately to any of the candidates? Feel free to do so.
Are we doing closing statements or not?
If you want to take the time, I have the time.
1 minute each?
1 minute sounds good to me.
All right.
Arnie, you have a minute.
All right. Yeah, I've done this a couple times before, and ultimately what we have to do here, people, is we have to make choices. The choices are between about who you vote for, the choices what we do every day in our daily lives. And I like to say the choices is when you look in another person's eyes, what do you see? Do you see fear or do you see love? Because if you see fear, we lost. And our political system is built upon our biological behaviors to arouse negative emotions quickly. And it happens in many aspects of our lives. And we have to make conscious decisions and choices about what we see when we look at each other. We can't be fear-based. Fear-based, we've lost. We have to change our dynamic and look and find the love in each other when we are in community, and when we talk with people, and when we vote, and when we engage with the community around us. So if you don't do that, folks, it's game over. It's likely to be game over anyways. I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but hope is hard to find right now. And just make that choice, though. It's not about who you vote for. It's about what you see when you look at somebody else. Fear or love, make a choice.
Maggie,
Is it all right for the lieutenants to speak as well?
if you would like, it's your choice.
Don't let anybody tell you that your vote is a throwaway vote. I mean, if you're here at a third-party independent event, you maybe have a little bit of a contrarian and think you're in it anyway. And I think that's a fallacy. I think if you vote with intent and you have reasoning that's rooted in wanting a better world for yourself and your neighbors, then no matter who you vote for, even if it would be a D or not, I don't think that's a wasted vote. That reflects your attitude and your wanting to weigh in. I invite you to vote for Dr. Turnbull and myself, not because of any one issue, but really the process. We want people at the table. We want lots of different voices when we tackle these big problems. We want conservative voices, liberal voices. That doesn't mean we're going to be neutral, and there's a little bit of everything, but some of those voices may have the solution for that particular time in place. And that process is worth supporting.
If I were elected, oh, I'm sorry.
If Michael were elected. Maybe you didn't mind that I came here today. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to brave this crappy weather and come here and listen to us. And if the reason you're here is because you're getting credit for a class, I think you deserve it. But it's really nice to be able to interact with you guys. And the thing is that we're in a really scary time in our country, and we have to be really brave. These are these defining moments of a people, and we're facing so many different challenges at the same time that this is the time to be bold. It's not in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. The time actually is right now to be bold, to be really true to ourselves. And I promise you that you will not ever regret that. We may not win every battle, but there's a longer arc to history, and it bends toward justice. I believe that. So we just keep working, and when every little thing we do is from a place of honesty and power, then over time that accumulates to real change.
Jill's sign said, "Don't vote for the lesser evil. Vote for the greater good." I would work for anybody at this table, because any one of them would be better than the leadership we currently have, both at the state and federal level. I would accept any one of these to work in my administration. All of us are united in certain things. We're about principle, we're about the planet, we're about protecting you, and I'm about protecting my children. That's why you should vote, that's why you should vote your values, that's why you don't worry about what somebody else thinks about your vote, because I agree with Maggie, it's time to be bold, it's time for change, it's time to find a new and better way of doing things.
So 71% of the millennials are ready for a third party. The two-party system is not working for us. So all of these people at the table here today have such great ideas, and ideas that vary so much from the mainstream. And part of that is because I don't think any of us are taking corporate funding, and so we are able to truly work for the people. I encourage you to vote for Dr. Michael White and myself, for people, planet, and peace over profits.
All right, well, I echo a lot of the things that have been said at this table tonight, and there's a reason that Tony Evers and Scott Walker aren't here, and there's a reason we're not on the stage with them at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association debates, and that is because we talk about issues that are threatening to their corrupt way of life, the corrupt two-party system. So we are in agreement of all that. We're all anti-corruption, we're all anti-war. They don't want to talk about that either. We're against money in politics, we're against all of those things. There are some things that are different between us, and you may have heard these things tonight. Our position relative to some of the other solutions you've heard from my venerable opponents here is we don't believe that government is a good solution in almost any case. And I think that's a very scientific based. I mean, Maggie's right in talking about that we're all scientists. We need a more scientific approach to government. I think the evidence shows, number one, that government does a bad job of almost everything it does because it's corrupt, because it's heavy-handed, because it tends to rise to the highest level. But also that government is best, those things we still need to do are best when they're done at a local level. And when more government takes place in city councils, in county boards, etc., then we keep a better watch on it. Those things that need to get done, that we need to share in, are done collectively, cooperatively, and not done by an overarching government that tends to be corrupt.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Taxation is theft. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, candidates, for being with us this evening. Zach, thank you very much for organizing this, and the other students that were compatriots in the process. Make sure you get out for Tuesday and vote if you already have not. Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for watching.